Hey everyone, I'm Allie Buchman with the Potomac Bead Company, and I am going to do a bracelet design for you featuring our Potomac Bead Company DiscDuo beads. So these are the DiscDuo beads in Jet Picasso. We sell them in both tubes, which have approximately 50, and then also in factory packs, which the factory packs have 300. That's the way we get them from the factory. The DiscDuo, if you haven't seen it or used it before, is a disc shape. So it's a little disc. It looks like a little pill. It's 6 millimeters, and it has 2 holes going through it. One right down the centered from the middle. So the DiscDuo here is going to be our main thing that we're using. If you need any materials for this bracelet at all, on the left hand side here is going to be a list of materials, as well as underneath me here in the details of the video is a description page. You can go on there to get any of the links to the materials that are used. You can also check out your local Potomac Bead Company store, or if you're traveling, always go to PotomacBeads.com to check out where our stores are located. We're happy to meet all of our awesome customers and fans. So for this bracelet, again, we're going to be using the DiscDuos. In my little sample piece, which literally the sample pieces usually come from whatever's laying on my bead mat, I went kind of pretty in pink, and it is the crystal slipperet, which is almost pink on one color, and then that pretty crystal peachy on the other color, and that was the DiscDuo that I chose for the sample piece. Then I also had some 3 millimeter olive bronze colored, or olive gold, I'm sorry, check glass beads that I worked with on the sides, and then some 15 and 11 O's. The colors came out really girly and kind of pinkish, especially it's almost reversible. If you get the DiscDuos that have some of the coatings on it, one side looks completely different from the other side. But for this one, I'm going to use the Jet Picasso, which the Jet Picasso, when you look at them, they have those awesome, almost silvery tone Picasso finish to them, and it is on both sides of it. In addition to my DiscDuos, I'm using 3 of the standard size of seed beads. I'm using 15 O's, and this is the Jet Hematite color of 15 O's, which is a check coating on the Miyuki seed beads. I'm also using a check coating, actually for all of them, I'm using a check coating. This is Crystal Aluminum 11O seed bead. And then my white shimmer, which is almost like a pearlized white in my 8O seed beads. Didn't even realize it or try to do all check, but I guess I am. Then I also have our Potomac Crystal Rondelles here. They are a 3x4 millimeter, and I'm going to use those instead of that check glass. I thought it would look nice since I'm using a little bit more muted color to bling it up a little bit. But any 3 millimeter will do. You could also use 4 millimeters too, just to give you a heads up. And that's the chrome color on those beads. I'm working on a bead mat here. And I have a couple beads kind of sitting here. I'm only going to use one of the random beads sitting here on my video mat, and that's going to be used for a bead stop. But thread-wise, I'm using Wildfire. With this color, it was a really kind of hard decision what to do as far as color-wise for my thread. Do I go white? Do I go green? Do I go black? And I looked at the thread lines that were created and where you see thread just a little bit, and I decided to go with green actually, which is an off-color thread. I'm using that in 0.006. I also have sitting near me a size 10 English style beading needle. This is a Pony brand needle. The old ones were Lance. They're the exact same. They just changed the packaging to reflect that it was a Pony style. So this is a size 10 beading needle and my bead mat. I'm also going to be closing off my bracelet with a cup button, which I will grab, and I'm going to do that in the Jet Picasso color as well. To get started, it is a 1 needle project. We're going to dump out to start our 8 O's and our DiscDuos. The others will follow shortly after that. So I've used my thread burner, and I have about 5 feet of beading thread. That's generally what I start out with. If I need to add, I like to add. I don't start out with more than that because I get all tangled up and I think it's hard to keep going with it. So generally about 5 feet is what I start out with. And I do keep anything that's longer than about 10 inches if I do have some left. I have that threaded on my size 10 needle, and I'm going to pick up that random bead that was on my bead mat and create a stop bead. I take it down to the base of my thread, and I'm going to leave, because this bracelet goes up and back, I'm going to be able to add the clasp, so I don't need to leave a tons of thread at the end. I'm going to go back through that vintage copper 11O seed bead, 2 times away from that thread end, and that creates my stop bead. You'll be able to see the thread then 2 times on the side of the bead, which this bead will come off. You always want to use a bead that's not part of your project, so by accident you don't sew back through it. The beginning of this bracelet is really easy. We're going to go straight down the line, adding the DiscDuos. If you do have a DiscDuo that is 2-sided like this, you have to pay attention to make sure you're going on every other hole lined up, so that way all the bright ones are on one side and all of the finish is on one side. So the nice thing is with our color, I don't need to do that. Literally, the pattern is 8 DiscDuo, 8 DiscDuo, 8 DiscDuo. And you're just going to take that the whole way up the line, the whole length of your bracelet. The bracelet is going to shrink a little bit because those beads are going to be a tiny bit offset. So one's going to go to one way, one's going to go to the other, and it does shrink up just a tiny little bit. So you're going to want to go about 1 inch longer than your wrist, and that's going to make up for that space. So again, just continuing, if you are doing a DiscDuo that is 2-sided and has a coating on it, then you do want to lay your beads out. A lot of times it's the easiest to flip them all to one side, and then you'll know to go through the same hole on each, or the opposite hole on each side. But all I'm going to do is continue going through for about 7.5 inches, adding my 11 O's, or my 8 O's, I'm sorry, that are separating the DiscDuos. So I've added my beads here, and you can see when I push them down, naturally they want to kind of go into that zigzag pattern. It's always easier if you're not sure exactly how much a pattern is going to shrink up and how many beads you need to add or take off. It's always easy when you have a stop bead to take beads off at the end. So I say make it a little bit longer than what you might think that you need, and then you can always take off from the beginning as you get down to do that. At this point, you want to get your clasp, and we're going to go ahead and attach our clasp, and then we're going to come down and kind of get ready to add on to the project. When you're at the end of your line, you're going to add your last 8O in place, and that 8O is going to hang out right after the last DiscDuo. To add my cut button here, again in that Jet Picasso color, I'm going to add 3 of my 11O seed beads. So I dumped those out on my bead mat in that silver aluminum color. I'm going to let those fall back down towards my project, and then I'm going to go up the back of my cut button. So I'm going up through the back of the cut button and pushing that down against the project. Because the project does want to curve naturally, because the holes are kind of cut on a curve to the DiscDuos, you want to push down a little bit so you do get that curvature effect. You can tighten it up at the end by tightening up the end connection as well, but it's always nice whenever you're working to keep the project as tight as possible, unless I say not to, and that way it will be easier at the very end to get it nice and tight. Once I'm at the top of the cut button, I'm going to add 3 of my aluminum silver. And then I'm going to change that up a little bit. We'll get some white in there. I'll add an 11, 8, 11. Come down the opposite side. And that's really just to decorate up the cut button just a little bit. On the opposite side here, when I'm coming out of the project, I want to add 3 more of my 11 O's to come down on the other side. When I'm coming back down the other side, I'm going to go back through that same 8O and out. Once I'm through the 8O, I pull, and that's going to again tighten up that little zigzag pattern that's happening with the DiscDuos. When I'm out of the 8s, I'm going to be adding on beads to each little section to get that little wave in the middle. To get that, the pattern is very simple. It is going to be 2 11s, 1 8, 2 11s. I'm going to go from 1 8 to the next 8 back towards the beginning of my project. All I'm doing again is just sewing through the 8s. This is a very Very simple one for the day. One that you can get down to and get done very quickly. Once I'm through that one, same pattern. 2 11s, 1 8, 2 11s. So through the next 8 in line. And you don't even have to worry at this point as far as which way they go. You can fix that, and we'll fix that and make sure that they're going every other way right before we tighten it up for kind of the finale. So just go right along the line again, very simple. 2 11s, 1 8, 2 11s, back through the next 8 down. So again, very, very simple. These are the simple projects that I love. Those that are great for shows that you can sell pretty easily because they didn't take you hours and hours to make. Great gift making ideas. A lot of these awesome new products, check products, either by us or by others that are manufacturing a lot of these new shapes, and the 2-hole shapes makes it really quick and easy to do a lot of these beading projects, which is kind of great. So I'm going to continue going on doing that 2 1 2 pattern, oops, and sewing right down the line of 8s. Continuing this back to the beginning the whole way, and then we're going to pick up and add our outer edge. I have my last set here of my 5 beads on, and I'm going to go through that first 8-0 bead that I added on. I don't want to go through the stop bead, so you want to make sure that that is out of the way. And what we're going to do on this side is make a loop in order for our cup button to go through. So it doesn't really matter what size beads you use to make the loop. I'm going to use my 11-0 in that aluminum silver, and I'm going to pick up approximately 24 beads to make my loop. If you want to, you can also do a peyote stitch. We're going to be coming back down the bracelet, so you can do that your second time down. So right now all you're actually doing is the single loop. Once you have all of those beads on, you're going to push them all down. I always use this as a good opportunity to clean up my bead mat a little bit, because our next beads that we're using are going to be our 15s and our faceted crystal rondelles. So once you have your loop big enough for your cup button to fit into, we're going to go back down the same 8-0 seed bead, that white bead that we're going through. We're going to go through that same bead down towards the button end. We're going to come right out then. So again, that's making my loop, and the button, you want to make sure if you're doing a different size that the button is going to fit inside the loop that you made. And what we're going to do is we're going to come down the side now, adding in our rondelles and a 15 millimeter or 15-0 seed beads. And we're going to be picking up the outer edge, so the outer open hole of one of the DiscDuos, as well as the 8-0 seed bead. So I'm coming out here through one of the white beads, and what I'm going to do is make sure that your project basically sits to every other direction. So you want to spin your DiscDuos that are already there and kind of spin them and make sure that they're sitting in line, so that way the beads are going every other direction, and those seed beads that you added are sitting in a snake-like formation. So you can go through right now before you get started and just kind of turn those, hold those in place, and make sure that they're sitting the way that you want them to, because we're only going to be picking up every other DiscDuo right now, and again those 8-0 seed beads. So go ahead right now and turn your DiscDuos and make sure that they are pointing out to the ends, and that little snake that we created with the 11s and the 8s is sitting right in a zigzag. So I'm out that white 8-0, and what I'm going to do is skip to the outer bead, or the outer hole of my DiscDuo that white bead is coming out of. I'm going to add 2 of my 11-0s and then go through that outer hole of the DiscDuo down towards that base of the project. And that's just going to decorate the end right there. Again, I'm going to dump out some of my 15s as well as some of my crystals, and that's what I'm going to be adding in right now. Once you have your 15 and your crystals dumped out, you're going to pick them up in a simple pattern. Right next to the DiscDuo, we're going to be adding a crystal. Right next to the 8, we're going to be adding a 15-0. So we're going to start coming out of the DiscDuo. You're going to add a crystal and a 15, and then we're going to pick up the 8-0 on the other side of the DiscDuo. You're going to skip the DiscDuo on the other side, continuing down one line, adding a 15 and a crystal, and so through the next DiscDuo. Again here, we're going to add a crystal coming out of the DiscDuo and a 15. Pick up the next 8, going down that zigzag. When you're coming out, 15, crystal, DiscDuo. I'm going to continue that pattern the whole way down my bracelet, which is going to establish those lines for the DiscDuos to actually sit and to get that nice curvature going on. So you're going to continue doing the crystal and the 15-0 when you're coming out of the DiscDuo, picking up one of the 8s, and then when you're coming out of the 8, switch it so that you're doing the 15 and the crystal, and then into the next DiscDuo. Again, we're going to continue this the whole way down the one side right now, just working on one side, adding in those crystals and 15s. I'm coming out of my last DiscDuo, and I have on my crystal and my 15-0, and I'm going to sew through the last of the 8-0s. At the same time, I'm going to pick up the 11-0s and the 8-0s on the end of that little peak. I'm going to use this opportunity, which I need to get to the other side, to reinforce the clasp. So I'm going to go back through all of those 11-0 seed beads, up the back of the cut button and through the seed bead at the top, over through the other seed beads, and then down the other side of the cut button through those 3 beads. This is going to reinforce it and have more thread going through that tension point. Once I have that, I'm going to be able to skip from the one side of my project to the other. To do that, just like we did on the other side, I'm going to come out after the 11-0s here, and I'm going to add 2 more of my 11s and come down the DiscDuo on the other side. So I did everything on one side. Now I'm just repeating that same pattern on the second side. As you repeat the pattern, it's a little wavy right now. That will help to lay the bracelet out flat. So you're just going to continue with a crystal and a 15, and then through the 8. And it's going to lay that out like you see. And then on the other side, the 15 and the crystal. And again, very repetitive, just continuing down the bracelet, adding that in and creating that nice snake design with your 15s and your crystals. As I'm coming out the end, having continued down this other side here, what I'm going to do is take the thread and needle, and I've gone through my last 8-0 bead. I'm going to go through the 11-0s that are also on the side, through the 8-0, and start to go up my peyote stitch, come out after the first bead. I'm going to use my 15-0s here in that nice hematite color to add my peyote stitch. I'm going to add 1 bead, skip a bead, and go through the 3rd bead in line. Next, I'm going to add 2 beads and go through the 5th bead in my baseline. If you don't know peyote stitch, you can watch the peyote stitch video. That will help you. I'm going to add 1 15-0 and go through the 7th bead, so we're going through the odd count beads. And this is going to create a peyote stitch, and the reason I'm going and adding 2 at certain points every other is because the 15-0s sit smaller than the 11 and because I'm doing them in a rounded section here, it's going to make up for the size difference. If you add 2 in every one, it gets too big, and there's not enough space to put 2 in between every, so that's that 2-1 pattern that we're creating. I'm going the whole way around here and creating that peyote stitch. Continue around, adding 115 for each peyote stitch and then 2, and alternating those counts. As I come around, then I'm going to come out the 8-0 and continue adding the last little step of the project. I've added my last peyote bead, and if you happen to have an odd count peyote, just skip the last bead and sew right through it. So I have 2 beads right next to one another at the end. I've gone through my 8-0 seed bead, and what I'm going to do now is just add a little bit of a almost picot trim style above my 8-0 seed beads. So this is going to be here above my white 8-0s. We're going to connect above them going through the 15s, the crystals, and then we're going to connect from there. So right now I'm through the 8-0, and I'm going to sew through my 11s, my 8, my 15, and my crystal, and get to the outside edge of the crystal here. And then it's up to you whether or not you want to connect and design on the outside of the DiscDuos as well, or if you want to keep them empty, and if you just want to design above the 8s. If you want to go around the DiscDuos and create a little bit of a design like that, you're going to use approximately 6 of the 15-0 seed beads. I'm not going to design anything around the DiscDuos. I want to keep them open because I want them to be the focus. So I'm going to sew through the DiscDuo, through my crystal bead there. And when I'm coming out the crystal here, I'm going to pick up the 15 that's next to it, add 3 more of my 15s, and then sew through the 15 in the crystal on the other side. That's going to just put that little trim right on the top of that zigzag effect that I want going on. Sew through your next set of DiscDuo, crystal 15, and then on goes 3 more 15-0s, and then through the 15 crystal DiscDuo and out the whole way over on the other side. So I'm just continuing creating that little trim right on the side of my 8-0 seed beads. So I've gone down the one side here decorating up, and I'm going to go from the DiscDuo straight across here. If you want to, you can reinforce that clasp one more time. That'll put 3 pieces of thread of your wildfire thread or fire line going through your project. So that really really reinforces it. What I'm going to do then is get to the other side of the project, and we're going to repeat the same thing down the other side. And you can see I'm just kind of sewing right along that line there and getting ready to decorate those ends. And again, you're just going to come out at every 15-0 point, add 3 more 15-0s, and go straight sew straight through to the next 15. Again, if you want to, you could add a little decoration coming out the crystal and going above the DiscDuo, but again, I wanted that kind of zigzag effect. If you really want a strong zigzag effect and really have it look build up, what you can do is use all the same color. So you can go with all blues, both in the 11s, the 15s, and going through the 8s as well. And that'll make it look very, very much like it's snaking back and forth. But again, continue down, adding those 3 beads and sewing through all of them, coming out to 15 and adding 3 more. And that's really going to create that nice lay of the bracelet and get that nice zigzag going on. So I'm at my last addition of 15s. I've got those 3 on, and I'm going to sew straight through the end of that project. Coming out of my DiscDuo, I'm going to go through my 11s. And on the other side here, I have my stop bead kind of hiding in the back. What I'm going to do is go through that 8, come out the other side next to my stop bead. If you want to, you can reinforce. You can do some more peyote on the edge if you wanted to add in 8/0s or anything like that. Pull those out to the side, add in some more 15s or add 11s back in. That's kind of up to you, but I'm just going to keep it as is. When I'm at the back here, I'm going to take off that stop bead. Take the needle off my program. Actually, I'll keep the needle on my project right now. And I'm going to tie knots. The nice thing is I'm right next to an 8/0, and you're not really going to see those knots because they're going to get hidden in between. I kept the needle on at the last minute because I'll actually sew back down my project a tiny bit, so that way we can pull the knot inside of a bead. So I tied 4 knots there. I'm going to sew back down the 8/0. And then on the inside route, because I know that's somewhere that I did not just come out of, I'm going through the 8, the DiscDuo, and an 8. I'm going to give a nice little pull, and you can see that's going to pull that knot right inside there. The last thing I'm going to do is grab a little bit of my super new glue, drop a tiny bit on the knot that I created, and I didn't have to add any thread to this here. Once I know that that's dry or getting dry, I'm going to pick up my thread burner, burn down that thread. If you don't have a thread burner, totally worth the investment. You can get in nice and close to your project and burn off those little threads. I also have used it in sewing projects and random things around the house with curtains and clothing. And you're going to finish then with your bracelet. It's a fun little quick bracelet that gets that nice zigzag effect. I used really opposing colors with that dark and light, so that way when I'm looking at it, I notice that zigzag effect going on the bracelet when I'm working with it. So the fun thing is you get to play around with some of the DiscDuos, whatever beads you use on the crystals, whether or not you want to use a 3mm bead. You can use a 2, that's going to pull it just in a little bit more, but you can really change up what type of bead you're working on. And you can have fun creating the bracelet, working with some of those new 2-hole beads, and getting almost that peyote zigzag effect with very little work. Again, it's just up and back the project. You could actually do this with 2 needles as well. And if you do really want to exaggerate that effect that's going on, pick a contrasting color for your DiscDuos and then concentrate on the same color for all of your seed beads for every size, the 11s, the 8s, and the 15s. So have fun making these fun little designs and projects using some of the awesome new Potomac Bead Company products like our DiscDuos and Potomac crystals. If you need any materials, feel free to go back to the beginning of the video. There's links there or below me in the show more under the description of the video. We'll have a list of the materials that were used. You can also take that to your local Potomac Bead Company store. If you're traveling or if you're not sure where they are, you can check out PotomacBeads.com and get the location list there. Also check us out on Facebook as well as keeping track of us here on YouTube and subscribing to the page to get regular updates like this, and also little product information about the thread burner, things like that. So always stay tuned for more. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and have fun creating.